Welcome to Pulse of Tech by SEAP, Pune's leading technology podcast from SEAP, the city's premier platform for tech organizations, delivering cutting-edge discussions and insights.
I'm Aditya. I'm the co-founder and CTO of ZenAdmin.
Have you ever wondered if you could have time and have a conversation with any tech pioneer? Who would it be? What would you say? And in which time frame? And most importantly, will you survive that? Welcome to Pulse of Tech, where today we tackle the art of team building in today's landscape. Our focus for today's episode is the distinct approach for a product versus services mindset while we onboard talent. I'm Parijat Sardesai, Chief Tech Pillar Lead and a Senior Director at Globant, your host, and here to unpack essentials of assembling a team that aligns with your business vision. Aditya is a co-founder and CTO at ZenAdmin.ai. He is an expert in building teams, and that's where we need his expertise today to talk about how we want to build a team for a product versus a services mindset.
We would want to blend in Aditya's product know-how with my services slant to make the dynamics of these two industries and figure out how do we hire talent for both these industries. So Aditya, I would want to understand from you what are the key factors which you want to check in a candidate or a profile when you are trying to hire for your seeding team members.
First of all, thanks so much for having me here, Parijat. It's really great to be here, and I think we are today discussing a very important subject because hiring, team building, team is always on top of mind for all types of founders, leaders, and managers. Coming to your question, I think when it comes to particularly the founding team members that you want to go out and hire, my perspective as a product-based co-founder is that my early hires have to be missionaries and not mercenaries, which is that I would want to work with people who really resonate with the mission that we are trying to solve as a company and not just are in it for a short stint or just for the paycheck. So what I find myself particularly going after when it comes to early stage hiring is actually finding not just the ones who match the functional skill sets that are needed for the role, but also the mindset and culture.
Awesome. I think that's where you and me would maybe differentiate in terms of when we hire for suppose a services industry profile, right? We look for how that profile can build good customer relationships, because I think that is one of the most important factors for us when it comes to hiring talent which can talk to a customer, try to understand the needs for a customer, and how do they envision what they can build for that customer. So now that brings me to a very important question here, that how much do you focus on domain knowledge when it comes to hiring for product? Because for services it's of a lot of importance to understand the domain you are working for the client with, right? So how much do you focus there when it comes to product?
I think, as with all things, it depends a little bit. And so, if I look at a couple of things, if I'll break it down into two buckets, one is, let's say, domain knowledge, and the other is being functional expertise. I think functional expertise is a must have, which is that you have to be able to execute what is required for that role. Whether I'm hiring a developer or a QA or a product or a design role, they have to be able to articulate and execute what are the requirements of that role, whether that's writing some code, building some designs, or whatever is needed for that function. As far as domain knowledge is concerned, I have a differing viewpoint there because oftentimes, particularly for early stage startups, you don't find domain knowledge very easily.
Yeah.
Because you are always kind of on the edge of what is even possible. You are doing something new, so it's very hard to find that domain expertise. There are some instances, such as, for example, you are reinventing something in an industry where you can try to go out and find people who have been there and done that before. I think to some extent that is always helpful, but with the limitations that you don't always find it also. So I look at domain expertise mostly as a bonus, that if I can get it, great. But for the most part, I focus on functional expertise as well as culture and mindset.
Yeah, I think culture and mindset are common to both these industries, because if I hire for my organization, I always look for a cultural fit, right? But when it comes to servicing clients, right, they demand that okay, the candidate who is going to work on any of our assignments has to understand what we are building. So if it is a BFSI client, they would want the candidate to understand that, okay, how banking works, how does investment works, what are the different nuances of that industry. If it is sports domain, a profile working on a sports domain is different than a profile working on a banking domain. And I understand that when it comes to product, you are focusing on one bit which could be learned, but here they would want to understand if the candidate has both sort of experiences ever in their past history as well. But thank you for your answer on. So now, in this era of generative AI coming in and product development getting really has to really accelerate in terms of the time to market as well, how do you want to leverage these no code low code platforms, and do you look that sort of a nuance in your candidate which you are interviewing for, suppose your startup or your product organization?
So I think my perspective here is that industries are always undergoing change, and it goes back a little bit to what is called as the innovator's dilemma, which is, let's say you're a large company like Google, you have a dominance in search, and soon AI comes in and is in a position to disrupt you. So as Google, you have to make the decision, like, do we embrace this and do we extend this, or do we slowly decline? Because I think ultimately it comes down to your ability to change is your ability to grow as an organization. So I think there is no hiding from the new technologies that are coming in. It is all about what you as a company, you as a team are able to do. You have to analyze your own use case, your own what you are trying to get it done, and think about, does this new technology help me or not? I think when it comes to something like low code or no code tools, you have to understand that there has been a lot of hype in the market as well, but that doesn't mean that there is no real value being created. So at my company, for example, we use a tool called Retool and AppSmith, which are known as the low code or no code kind of internal tool builders.
Yeah.
So this is one area where we have really been able to identify that we don't necessarily need to spend a lot of developer bandwidth to actually solve this area, but yes, we can use this tool to actually accelerate how many deep internal tools we are able to create for our own team members. I think that is one big example that I can identify, that we have been able to successfully adopt a low code tool, and it has resulted in tremendous productivity gains for our team.
Okay, awesome. I think Retool, for some reason, we have also tried to explore Retool, so I understand what. And all these low code or no code platforms help us solve a specific problem, right? So we can do some exploration on them, and they can help us solve that problem. But like, there can't be a silver bullet to solving all the problems for every customer. For us, the biggest challenge comes in when it comes to IP, right? Because the customers sometimes want to understand, and the cost associated with that tool. So the customer sometimes wants to understand what is the gain, or what is the kind of ROI they are getting from buying a license for that sort of a tool. But thank you, this helps a lot to understand why a product mindset would think about hiring for low code or no code platforms.
Right. Another thing that I'm thinking is that even when a technology is obviously world changing,
Yeah.
it still takes years and decades to actually roll out and like really see the true value coming out of it.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing to keep in mind is to manage your expectations when you are actually starting to use or explore a new technology such as AI or low code or no code tools, and start with the assumption that it is going to be an incremental benefit and not a game changer. So tempering your expectations and looking at it more as a tool that can further improve productivity is important to actually get the value out of it.
Well said. Yeah, sure. So one more important point in this era after COVID-19 has been the cost of talent, right? And associated with that is retention, right? So I think that has been the biggest challenge for every organization, whether it is product, whether it is services. How do you make a balance between the kind of cost you want to invest in talent, as well as how much would you want to pay to retain your talent, and do you want it to be a money game? So what are your views on that?
So I would like to start with the fact that retention for me is a no-brainer, and it is an absolute must for me to retain my team members for a long period, because the value of an organization lies in its people. A company is the people that are a part of the company. And if you are in a state where you are having a lot of attrition or turnover, it makes it very, very difficult to focus on and solve big problems. So having team members that are with the organization for a long period, that are building up that organization knowledge, is very, very critical for your ability to innovate as well as solve any hard problems. So that's about retention. Now we have decided that, okay, yes, retention is a goal that is worth going after. Now we have to figure out how do we get it done. And as you're saying, yes, over the past few years, we have seen a lot of salary inflation, expectation inflation on both sides of the avenue, both from the perspective of a company as well as from the employees as well. And I think as a leader, it comes down to whether or not you are able to deliver what you are promising and what you are thinking your company's mission is. At some point, the bill comes due, and the fact that whether the thing that you are working on, is it working or not. Let me dive a bit deeper there to explain what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think when a team member joins your organization, in the beginning, it's a new jump for them. They are starting a new journey. Over time, they will only stick with you if the journey is worth it for them. And that is what I reinforce within my own team members as well, that we should not treat each other like a family, we should treat each other like a sports team. And we are a part of this as long as it makes sense individually for the company as well as for the actual employee as well. So as long as the deal makes sense for both of them, that's why we are a part of this. And we want to have this kind of a high bar, both from the perspective of the employee as well as the company, to actually continue on this journey. So given the fact that we want the employee or the team member to be with the company for a long period, that means that the company also has to match that participation, that commitment from the employee, with an improvement in whatever the employee's goals are. With, for example, the employee wants to have a higher salary, have increments, have a bigger title, have more responsibilities. The company has a responsibility to actually be in a place to be able to offer that. So ultimately, I think it comes down to the fact that whether you as an organization and you as a leader, are you able to deliver the results or not? And it might be a bit hard thing to swallow, but if the company isn't doing well, if it is not working well, it's actually okay if your team members start leaving you. And I think that is the fundamental reality that you have to accept as a leader, which is fundamentally you want to do what is best for your company and what is best for your team. And as long as it goes good, then you are all on this journey together.
Yeah, I think when it comes to talking about retention, the culture of your organization is also a very important factor when it comes to retention, because when it comes to services industries, right, your client is somebody with whom your talent works. It's they have to look at two cultures there. One culture is the culture of the organization, and the other culture is the culture of the client they are serving. But if the culture of your organization is that solid, where you just rightly mentioned that if they work like a sports team, and if you know, if your employee knows that there is somebody to back me up in terms of whether what sort of a negotiation we need to do with the client, I think that plays a very important role in retention, for in our case at least, I would want to say.
Absolutely. I think that definitely applies to product-based companies as well, which is you're going to have team members that are in charge of building. You're going to have team members that are in charge of selling or maintaining the customer relationships with as well. And I think in order to really build upon those relationships, whether those are within your team, whether those are with your customers, external stakeholders, even investors, having that organizational knowledge build up over time, that is how you compound as a business. That is how you get the next stage of growth.
Right, and we were talking about domain before that, and if your talent keeps on coming and leaving, that domain expertise would only be built when they are with that domain for a longer period of time. For us, the challenge of cost inflation has also been there after obviously COVID happened and we went remote and we came back, and all of that. Nowadays, the factor of coming to the office, working hybridly has also been one factor which plays a very important role when it comes to retention. And you have to find the right balance between what do you want to compromise and what you don't want to, because sometimes your customer wants to see the team working in the office, right? And it makes a lot of sense for them because they want to see the collaboration which happens there. How do you maintain that collaboration in your teams, because obviously you would also be in the hybrid or a remote sort of a working scenario?
Absolutely. So we are in fact a completely remote and
Yeah.
completely global company with
Okay.
team members spread across multiple different countries.
Correct.
And the way that we do it is that we try to balance it out with reasonable amount of in-person interaction as well, which
Yeah.
is that team members that are within the same city meet up occasionally once or twice a month. The whole company meets up, does like a company offsites every let's say a couple of times a year or something like that. And we find that having a good mix of this is really, really important to keep up that bond. I think what you lose out or what you gain in remote work and hybrid is a little bit freedom, a little bit more responsibility, ownership, but you miss out a little bit on the bonding and communication of it.
Okay.
So, as leaders of the organization or as managers there, you have to be really, really mindful of the fact of what your team is gaining and also what they are losing, and try to mitigate whatever they are losing, whether that is with games that you can play together, whether that is with explicit interactions or meetings that you want to create for your team members. That is very, very important to kind of keep that bond going.
Thanks. So Aditya, in today's world, when AI technologies are gaining so much of traction, right, and we want to leverage that for any solution which we are building, right? What do you look in your talent when it comes to these AI technologies which are emerging?
So, in terms of talent, I look for a couple of things. One, when I'm specifically going after a new technology such as AI, if the new joinees or new candidates that you are onboarding, if they already have experience with that, that is a plus point. But I'm also mindful of the fact that with all new technologies, we are not going to find experts always in that technology, because things are developing so fast on the edge. We will not always be able to hire people who have really been doing it for a long time. So instead of domain expertise or instead of functional expertise, I actually focus more on their ability to learn fast and adopt new technologies fast.
Okay. And I mean, do you only look for the cognizance of these technologies, or you are looking for any implementation details also in terms of the talent which you are hiring?
So if they have worked on something very similar in their past, it's very easy for us to kind of use that as a bonus for hiring that employee, because they are going to be building something similar for us also. I can take an example for that. For example, let's say if we are building an AI chatbot, and if the person that we are hiring comes from a background where they have worked with chat experiences or AI technologies, that is a plus point, because we will be able to accelerate how fast we are able to onboard our team to the new technologies and how fast we are able to implement and give out an output.
So once you have onboarded talent, right, the next process of getting the employee imbibed into your culture, into your organizational, and making him aware of the policies or aware of your organizational nuances is very important. What are the things which you really take care of? And since we spoke about that you are like completely remote. So what are the things which you really need to pay a lot of attention to when you are onboarding talent in your organization?
I think as a company grows, so should the onboarding process. Because what are we really looking to do with the onboarding process is we want the employee to be able to articulate what is the company's vision, what is the mission, what problem are we trying to solve for our customers, to really be able to resonate with why was the company created in the first place. Because in a distributed culture and in a remote and hybrid setting, it becomes even more important to set up this alignment in terms of mindset and in terms of know-how, so that everyone is independently aware of what needs to be done. Otherwise, you fall into meeting hell. You have to have too many meetings to align everyone, and that wastes a lot of time. So, the goal of my onboarding process is to be able to accelerate the learning curve of a new employee coming into the organization, so that on the one side they understand and deeply learn what is the company's mission, and on the other side functionally understand what is required from them to be able to make contributions to their project.
And what about how do you do the culture onboarding for them? Is there anything specific you do for that?
Absolutely. So we do a very specific culture onboarding in two different manners. One is it's actually the last round of interviews that we do. So we do interviews starting with an introduction, then a technical rounds, then it ends with a final culture round. So we do a bunch of checks within the culture round to ensure that the candidate's expectation matches with those of the companies. And within their first month of onboarding, we actually do a dedicated culture onboarding sessions as well, where we tell the new joinees, which is it can be one or it can be multiple new joinees. We explain to them what are the values of the companies, how do we want to work together. We really want to figure out how new employees can really accelerate on their onboarding, not just from a functional perspective, but also from a cultural perspective.
Okay, that's very important because uh, in services also, when we are working for a particular client, right? As I was talking to you earlier about it, that they bring in a different culture. So for the employee to understand what is the culture of the organization they are working for is very important. And I think what you said, I completely resonate with it, because they have to be very clearly made aware of what is the organization they are employed for and what do they bring to the table when they go as a representative of this organization to serve any of their clients.
Absolutely.
So I think that's very important. So Aditya, when it comes to short term versus long term goals of hiring talent in your organizations, what are the things which you want to really emphasize on in terms of your targets, long term and short term, right? And do you want to leave us with some insightful thoughts for the day, as in what do we look for particularly in something very specific when we are hiring for both these sort of industries?
Got it. So my view when it comes to the long-term versus short-term goal for hiring, or let's say for onboarding any new team member, is usually as a company you are hiring when you have some requirement, when you have a need, when you have something almost immediately, sometimes very urgently for the new joinee to actually start working on. So there is a short-term need that has to be filled. It's usually a project, it's usually something that has to get fulfilled by that employee. So the short-term need is that the candidate or the new joinee should be able to assimilate into the organization's culture, should be able to understand the project, the problem statement that they are working on, and to be able to onboard onto the tech stack, onto the team's working style, to be able to start creating output quite quickly. So usually we want to do that relatively fast within a few days or weeks. As projects keep going on, then you start looking more towards, okay, what do we really expect from our team members in the long term? That is when the long term expectations start coming in. And I would articulate my long term expectations from our team members as being able to build upon the organizational knowledge and culture that we are all creating together in this journey, of being able to think from first principles and being able to identify not just the right solutions but also the right problems to be able to solve. I think in the long term, the companies that keep reinventing themselves and keep disrupting themselves to some extent are the ones that truly thrive, and the ones that don't. So that is my perspective on the long term expectations. I think as a closing thought, what I would ask companies to focus more on not just the technical skill sets but actually also the culture and mindset, and what are you really expecting from an employee should be clearly articulated and communicated to the candidate. From the perspective of candidate, I would ask them to look more beyond just the paycheck and actually look at how does this fit into my journey, what are my other expectations, what are the long-term goals that I want to accomplish, and how is the company helping me accomplish. I think keeping an eye on things beyond the transactional nature of employment is going to help accomplish the long-term goals for both candidates as well as companies.
Thank you so much, Aditya. I think transparency was a very important factor, which has been, I think, thriving in all these years for any organization while hiring talent. Thanks so much, Aditya. And that wraps up the thrilling episode of Pulse of Tech by SEAP. We hope you enjoyed diving into the tech universe with us today. A big shout out for our guest today. His insights were like a software update for our brains.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pulse of Tech by SEAP. Visit seap-pune.org to learn more about SEAP. See you next time.